listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome everyone. Today I'm joined once again with my friend Kimmie Haliburda. Kimmie is a psychic intuitive, animal communicator, and medium. She is well versed in the Akashic Records and various modalities of healing. She is a Reiki Master and practitioner of Marconic, quantum, and elemental energy. Kimmie is a graduate student at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, holding a bachelor's degree in both sociology and philosophy. Most of all, Kimmie is a firm believer that we are all infinitely capable beings worthy of love and abundant kindness. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's so good to be back for the fourth time.
Yes. So someone was telling me that they went through and listened to all your episodes, and I was like, I was like trying to remember all of the topics because you've been on the show, I think, more than anyone else.
Really?
So I think this is number 5, and that would make you the most reoccurring guest we've had. So
that's
welcome
wild.
back.
Hello. I thought it was number 4. You know what? It doesn't matter. Numbers don't matter. It's fine. We talk about something vastly different every time I'm here.
Right. And we're always like, well, what are we going to do next time?
And then we have so many ideas. We have so many ideas that we can't possibly fit them into like a calendar year.
Right.
That's what I've noticed. And then you have to give time for other guests. Right. Because this isn't the Astral and Kimmie podcast. This is the Astral Hour. And so we have so many ideas that maybe over the course of several years, we'll get through all of our ideas.
Yes. But I love that. I love that we're always leaving inspired with like, well, what's the next thing? What's the next adventure? So, all right. So for today's episode, we're focusing on collective fear, which is kind of an energy that I would say most people listening have noticed is lingering around. So Kimmie's going to define the collective for us and kind of explain what it means to be a part of that collective experience. So can you define the collective for us?
So first of all, we're all a part of the collective. I like to see the collective as the energy of all of humanity and the awareness of humanity's current condition and lived experience. Some people refer to the collective as collective consciousness. I really think either one works. And the way I like to describe collective energy is think about walking into a room and you feel the ambiance is happy and comfortable. And you feel that with your intuition, your mind, your body, you instantly connect to these really good and happy feelings, right? But when the energy of a room feels hostile and heavy, you'll also feel that immediately too. And so when the collective energy of a group of people, or when the collective energy of humanity is that of moving forward and healing due to the awareness of their spiritual condition, the collective is on a path to ascension. But on the other side, when the collective is feeling oppressed and fearful, then that really comes down to you on an individual level too, and leaves you feeling scared, right, and hopeless and powerless. And I think that a lot of people are feeling that right now amidst political and economic chaos and uncertainty. And I think that is an understatement.
Right. Yeah, I have a lot of planets in the 12th house in my chart, which is sometimes associated with the collective unconscious, and specifically my moon is there, conjunct Saturn. And what I've noticed is I have to ask myself all the time, like, is this mine? Like, is this feeling mine, or has something just happened? Because I will actually notice if something has shifted in the collective, like say a tsunami or an earthquake or some kind of like catastrophic event, I will start to feel anxious and I haven't turned the news on or anything. So I'll be like, okay, what just happened? Because I'm just sitting here like having tea, living my life, and I'll suddenly start to have anxiety. And I kind of just associate this with having the moon in the 12th house. So it's just interesting that we're even talking about this, because I feel like I'm so sensitive to that collective energy. So what would you suggest for somebody that is extra sensitive? How can they ground themselves? Like, are there any practices for staying centered among this political or the economic upheaval that we're experiencing today?
So I'll preface this by saying I certainly don't know everything, and I don't know all of the techniques that you could use, but things that I personally recommend, especially to my friends who are really, really feeling that oppression and who have every right to be in a state of fear, because obviously some groups of people are a lot more at risk than others right now, right? And so what I have been doing personally is I just limit myself to a certain amount of news or social media, because social media in and of itself can be so not just overwhelming, but I mean, it can really scatter your thoughts, right? But it's one thing to want to stay updated on the news and recent events, but it's not okay to feel so overwhelmed by the news that you develop paralyzing anxiety and worry.
Right.
You're not going to be able to take care of yourself or anything or anyone else. And you won't have the capacity to make any type of difference, especially on a community level. And community is where we know that social change starts, right? I think that a lot of people forget that they have power within themselves to help make their community a better place. Now, not everybody has the resources to do that or the capacity, but we all do have the we all have the potential, right? And so I would say limit your news intake. Go outside, as one would say, touch some grass.
Yes.
I think touching grass is an excellent way to keep yourself grounded and out of a state of fear. Again, if you're in a constant state of fear, you really can't overcome the chaos that surrounds you or is surrounding a lot of people, right? Not to get too overly political in this podcast, but there is a collective fear. There's a collective fear for some really prominent reasons, right? And some for some really scary reasons that are very, very realistic.
Right.
But staying in that vibration of fear really doesn't help you. So, as far as grounding techniques, I know I like to put myself in a like the good witch from the Wizard of Oz, like the big iridescent bubble. I like the big iridescent bubble. I have a close friend of mine, Jennifer Stone. She's an amazing psychic, and her favorite thing to do is envision herself when she's doing her protection work. So she grounds herself first, right? You imagine you're a tree, you go sit outside for a while, you sit in a chair near a window with the sunlight coming through, however you want to ground yourself. And then whenever you do your protection bubble, she likes to put herself in a hamster ball.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is just too much fun not to do. So I've kind of changed from my bubble to a hamster ball, right?
Right.
And then I just kind of roll around and do my thing, and I just protect my energy, because protecting your energy is also a part of not like it creates a barrier between you and what's going on outside of you to allow yourself to better take care of yourself and the immediate people around you. And then that extends out towards your community if you are in a position where you can do so. And the more you protect yourself, the more you can do not only for you, but for other people. So I think that that's really important. Again, it goes back to what can you do for your community? You really can't do anything for yourself unless you're grounded and taking time to take care of yourself. And as you were talking about natural disasters and feeling that something is really off, even if you haven't read anything on Instagram or Facebook, or even if you haven't seen something come up on the news, that natural disasters, obviously, they cause a tremendous amount of collective upheaval, right? And they have the ability to shift energy in a really major way. And so if you are in a position where you can volunteer time and especially money to rescue efforts and relief funds, that's also, I feel anyway, a good way to feel as if you have more control over your outside world, because that's an actual act to take some of your control back and to take some of your power back, right? When there's so many different external things going on that are really causing a lot of people to feel very fearful and powerless.
Right. And like you were talking about, like the media, I mean, they're called influencers for a reason. Like these on social media, like when people are just spouting out, you know, these fearful thoughts, they're just stirring that pot. They're keeping it alive in your awareness. And so if you're scrolling and you're seeing like 30 different influencers talking about something, you know, and you're starting to feel paranoid and you're starting to feel unsafe, those feelings are the red flag that maybe you need to get off. But I just saw this guy the other day and he had like 20,000 followers and he was spouting off all sorts of, you know, just stuff about that sounded very, very paranoid to me. And, you know, trigger warning, this dude literally like live, like ended his life because he was so scared of these things that he actually had no control over. And it was a tragedy. And then it's also, I'm just thinking about how many people were also being influenced by his fear that he was projecting back out. And so it's almost like our responsibility as individuals to do what we can to transmute it when we can. I mean, obviously sometimes it's so big, that it's like, oh, we can't change the course of that reality for, you know, 100,000 people. But we can do our best to say, okay, I'm feeling paranoid. I'm feeling afraid. I'm going to work through that fear so that I'm not putting that back into the collective, because we have a role as individuals where we are influencing it, even though it seems minuscule, to say, okay, I'm not going to let that make me scared. I'm not going to let that influence me in this negative way, even though I can feel the impact of this. So in that moment, I do feel like it's empowering to take kind of a stance, and we can't change the course of reality for everybody. And so there's also this, we're seeing stuff all over the world now, which was not something humans could do, you know, 100 years ago. And now we're worried about people in these other countries that we would never even know like existed. And so there's so much more fear because we've expanded. And so now we're, you know, afraid for these people and these people and, you know, and it gets overwhelming because you can't possibly save everybody. But you see the stories all the time. Like, this person's abducted. This, you know, it's just like, you know, traffic wrecks and crime and definitely the political stuff. These unknowns that we have no control over. So that is another thing that I've tried to like step back from. I'm like, if I can't actually change this, then I'm not going to let it, you know, sit in my consciousness and just make me paranoid, because like there's nothing that I can do to stop that. But I can, you know, love my children and build a garden and, you know, support my friends. So I love that you bring it into this community effort of what can we change? Well, we can change things at the level that we can actually make impact, which is building these safe communities for people to retreat into during these periods of chaos that we don't have control over. So I do feel like community is a huge part of it. So in what ways do you think that we can show up as true allies for those most vulnerable members of our communities? How can we as individuals spark meaningful change at the local level or the community level?
So I think about this a lot, and I have a section on my website titled Encouragement, And it's essentially, and I have a disclaimer at the top, and I say, I really don't know everything. I'm a psychic. I'm a medium. I do all of those things, and I think some people find them to be very interesting. But I don't ever pretend like I know everything, right? But what I can tell you in the real world is that I am, well, it's all a real world to me, right? So in, I guess what you would say in 3D reality, what I do is I'm a sociology student. And I'm getting my master's degree at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville in political economy and globalization. And one thing that I am really interested in, I have a wide scope of interest academically, but something that I'm particularly interested in is how you can make a difference at a community level, in particular with environmental or political chaos, right? Like in the middle of environmental and political chaos. And so I think one is be aware of your privilege. Being aware of your privilege and understanding really what your position in society is, like your true social positionality, is very important. And also what is hard for me to conceptualize is, so I wish that there was a book that was written, or some kind of guide, I suppose, on exactly how to be a good ally, especially when you're, I'm a middle-class white girl from Tennessee, right? And I really want to be an ally, but I also know that that's not welcomed all the time. And so I want a paper or a book or some kind of guide that talks to me like I'm 5. This is how you be an ally. That's what I want to see in academic literature, right? But I think finding gaps in your community resources and trying to fill them to the best of your capacity. 1, understand your privilege. 2, understand your capacity and understand that your capacity will change. But also find those gaps. And so what I mean by that is, think about this. You heard of like those free medical and dental clinics that are set up for people who otherwise couldn't afford to get those services. Well, let's say there's a clinic set up in the middle of downtown, but the buses in your city don't really go, like for Knoxville, for example, I don't feel that there are enough buses that go to East Knoxville. And I don't feel that there are enough buses that go to that area to provide people with the services that they really need and the transportation that they need. So find gaps in your community resources. Find what your community needs. Okay, well, if there's not enough transport on that side of town, or if the clinic is set up on a day that is like where there's not as many buses, or there's a lot of people who have signed up, but then they call and they're saying, well, they actually can't get to their appointment because they don't have transportation. Maybe you get in contact with the clinic, right? Maybe you get in contact with the people who've organized these free clinics. And again, this is just an example, and then offer to transport people.
Right.
And just get them to their appointment. So maybe they don't have to cancel, right? Maybe you offer to help feed, like people without houses, people without homes. Maybe you offer to do things in that capacity. Maybe you volunteer some time at a domestic violence shelter.
Right.
Maybe you join Big Brothers Big Sisters. And like there's so many different ways to help, but you have to figure out, again, establish like what your capacity is.
Right.
And do so within your capacity, because it's really not going to be helpful if you, like, you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of someone else. And again, going back to my friend Jennifer Stone, she loves to use this example of whenever you're in a plane, and let's say the plane starts to crash, you put your oxygen mask on before you put it on your kids, because
Right.
you're not going to be helpful to anyone
If you're passed out.
if you're passed out or if you're dead or whatever, right? How can you save your children? You have to put that oxygen mask on yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
So do that first and get yourself grounded and get yourself at least to where you know what your limits really are emotionally, mentally, physically, and then help where you can. I do know that Knoxville has something called the Red Book of Resources. I have been wanting to take on a project for a while, just on my own, nothing at all related to my school career, but I've wanted to look in that Red Book of Resources and find the gaps and try to help fill those gaps as well. For example, you know, both of us have a very close friend that passed away recently, and he had a lot of medical issues, and he was not able to get the help he needed because of an insurance barrier. Like he didn't have health insurance. And I just wonder, well, what if you knew who to contact and how to contact the people at a hospital or at or like through, you know, some of these state systems, right? In order to get some type of insurance or understand how I don't know of really any payment plans for medical care that's as far as large costs, like big surgeries and things that you might need that are really important. Like our friend also needed spinal surgery, and how do you do that if you don't have the money to do that, and if you don't have health insurance? And so I also think, our system that we have is very broken. And since our system that we have is very broken, how can we make it function as much as we can to actually help people? How do we, I hate using the word hack, but how do we, so I'm just not, because I think that's lame, but how do we get a better understanding of the broken system that we have and figure out how to help people when they really, really are in crisis?
Right. And educate them on the resources that are available, because there are some really amazing resources out there, but if you don't know how to access them, then you just don't know. So I really like, looking at what's your capacity, but also what are your gifts? What are things that you can offer that just kind of go with your overall nature? So like, even if it's just art, like going and teaching a free art class to some kids, like you're still inspiring change. You're giving them a moment to step out of fear. Maybe you're providing some snacks for them while they're there, and you're giving them hope. And then those children grow up to create a more beautiful reality. So maybe if it's beyond your capacity to really put yourself out in there and like work at like helping people at that poverty level and like food banks and things, maybe that overwhelms you. You can still have meaningful change in what seems like these simple little acts of kindness, even, and then if you're interested in a certain area, I used to actually work at Pellissippi when I went to college in the service learning department. And we would encourage students to volunteer. And we had a list of like 50 different places that we were affiliated with, and they could volunteer and get credits. And all you have to do is contact and say, where can I be of service? So you call Second Harvest, right? They're losing their funding right now. And you say, how can I be of service? So if you don't know, then just reach out and ask, because I promise you, they will give you a list of needs and a list of ways that you can help. And so a lot of times being informed just takes a moment of sending that email or making that phone call and saying, I have 30 minutes on Saturday. Is there anything that I could do to help you guys out? And, finding the organizations that you really, that kind of light you up, that you're like, I would like to help, brothers and sisters. I would like to help children, or, food scarcity is the thing that really triggers me. So that's where I'm going to put my attention. So allow yourself to direct it in ways that feel most uplifting to you as well. And then I feel like your capacity will be a little bit more, because you're not putting yourself in a space that's, like traumatizing or going to just drain you. Because there's all sorts of people that need help that are in alignment with what you're really good at offering. So I really love just guiding people to ask those questions like pretty consistently. And because there are a lot of people out there that are great at the networking aspect of this, to say, oh, you need this resource, I'm going to get you to this person. So maybe that's the role that you're playing, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe your role is saying, hey, I know a place, and you're just sending people places. That's still meaningful change, even if you're not just like pulling up your sleeves and, building houses for Habitat for Humanity. Some people can't do that. They're not physically capable of building a house. So that's okay. There's all sorts of other ways, that you can assist your community. And there's way more options, I think, than we even realize that are available. So it's just getting informed.
I really appreciate all of your examples, but I did want to comment on a couple. So one, when you were talking about, well, maybe you volunteer to teach an art class for kids, right? Mm-hmm. So art's very subjective. Mm-hmm. And it's really important for children to understand that art can look like really anything. Yeah. It doesn't have to fit any particular model of good. But you have to be in a state of play to be creative.
Right.
It doesn't work otherwise. Mm-hmm. You can't create art without being in a state of play.
Right.
So, and some people will be like, well, I think you have to be in a state of despair to create art. And it's like, well,
I mean, there's the blue period, right?
Yeah, there's that. But, yeah. But as far as, getting with some kids and slapping some paint on a canvas, that's play.
Right.
That's play.
And it's taking them out of maybe a situation that's really stressful at home, you know, and helping them step into that creative aspect of their being. And when we nourish that, those children grow up and they're able to create different systems because they have the ability to create, because you created a safe space for them to explore and imagine when they were a child. So I'm just throwing it out there that it doesn't always have to be picking up trash on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Because some people, I think that's how they hear volunteer and they just have like one or two pictures in their mind. Mm-hmm. But as somebody that has worked for an organization that literally brings like affiliations all together, there is like endless opportunities to volunteer. Maybe you're, working with autistic kids at the horse barn. My dad used to volunteer at Star, and this was so good for him and the children. And when we serve our community, we are uplifting ourselves as well. There is no form of service that you're going to be like, man, I wish I wouldn't have helped that kid today.
That was a real drag.
It really is needed. And to me, it's a spiritual process as well. So a lot of people are all about spirituality, but if you're not serving, then what is the point? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, what are you actually doing to help anybody? So, sometimes we do have to put ourselves out there and say, how can I be a service? And I promise it will uplift you as well in the process.
Oh, absolutely. And even if, and I think some people get really caught up in, who they can help. And well, for example, we are in a housing crisis. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that don't have the capacity to help because time is also a huge resource, right? But having time to do things is also a major privilege.
Right.
Just being able to take a couple of hours to do something that isn't directly related either to work mm-hmm. or essential, such as like going to the grocery store or going to doctor's appointments or whatever for your own upkeep. If you even have money to go to the doctor, right? There are plenty of people who work 60 hours a week and they still don't have the money mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Or their insurance is really bad.
Right.
and they can't go to the doctor or the dentist regularly. And that is a broken system. We live in a broken system. Absolutely. And so I think a lot of people get really caught up in well, I don't have the money. And it's like, well, time is also a major resource. And if you do have time, you're right. It doesn't have to be physical.
Right.
It doesn't have to be physical labor. It can be, okay, well, I'm going to go paint.
Right. Or just acts of kindness.
Yes.
Or sharing. You see a cool thing and it's like, hey, this is the cold shelter for the homeless. And maybe you share that on your social media.
Exactly.
It doesn't always have to be a grand gesture.
No.
It can say, oh, I see a need. I'm going to give that person $5 because I see a need. Or that woman looks really sad. I'm going to go smile at her and ask her how her day is.
Just something.
Like it doesn't always have to be, if you don't have money, which, I don't have a lot of money, so I don't really be donating because I need donations. So, so what do I do? Well, I provide opportunities for things where people can have, free services. And if they have the money, they can donate. Or maybe I am encouraging people, maybe I'm just going to comment on their thing and tell them how amazing their art is, because like that's going to inspire hope in their life. It doesn't always have to be like, okay, I can't get a babysitter. I can't go to their thing. Exactly. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to like build them up. I'm going to share their stuff and I'm going to tell them how badass they are. And guess what? That is something,
Yes.
And so it's like, I feel like the opportunities really come to us for us to respond to. And it's like, okay, well, I have the energy. I'm going to build this person up right now. And the little ways that I can in this moment, even if I'm low, there's still little things that I can do. And as you do that, you start to feel better.
That's true.
So, and because you're actually building community and supporting your community. And I think that we are designed to support each other. And so when we do these things that are isolating us and we're on that rat wheel or whatever wheel
the
they
hamster
say.
Wheel.
The hamster
It's
wheel.
the rat wheel. Astral and her rat wheel. It's a big one.
The hamster wheel. Yeah. Okay. But there are moments even then that you can help. You know? And so I think it's just changing your perspective on what does it look like to serve.
Well, yeah, and your perspective on what is help and how you can reduce harm and suffering as an individual.
Right. You can at least not add to the suffering.
Yeah, like, you do your best. But no, and it's, I know we're kind of giggly right now, but sometimes it's hard not to be because it's some days there's something that is so ridiculous that comes out on the news and it's so horrible. And you can either really let it absolutely, totally bring you down, right? And again, I'm a white girl from Tennessee. I understand my privilege. I understand that not everybody gets, like, I have a privilege in being able to ignore certain things that comes out in the news, right? Because the color of my skin is great protection against a lot of what's coming out, and a lot of hate. But it's be aware of your privilege and help where it counts. Right. Be aware of your privilege. Figure out your capacity and help where you can. And that's why I feel that going back to self-care, super, super important.
Yeah. So could you explain a little bit in more detail about why self-care is essential, not just for our personal well-being, but for the collective healing and resilience?
So and this really blends along nicely in what we've been talking about. So self-care it's essential to not feel powerless and overwhelmed. When the collective is subjugated to whether it's harmful political forces or other kinds of oppressive externalities, we know that there's going to be civil unrest, and we know that there's going to be an upheaval of norms and likely cultural beliefs and things of that nature that could happen. And this is really destabilizing. right, to the collective, but also to individuals and families. And as we were talking about it, natural disasters also can cause major shifts in the collective. But being afraid makes you a lot easier to manipulate. So no matter where that collective fear is coming from, being afraid in and of itself makes you a lot easier to manipulate. Yeah. You can't, if you want to try to organize any type of social change or strike, and again, I'm not an expert on this at all, but what I do know is that you can't organize your thoughts, let alone organize a group of people to achieve a goal or to fight back against an oppressive force if you're in a state of overwhelm. Overwhelm right. is the point of being bombarded with all of this kind of news, right? Because that makes you a lot easier to manipulate.
Right. It's disempowering.
Yes. I went through this stage a couple months ago, and I just felt it was so weird. So I do a lot of energy manipulation, a lot of candle work, a lot of energy work, all different types of it. And I remember feeling such doubt in my ability to create my own reality, like to co-create my reality with the universe. And I felt so just disempowered. And I talked with some friends, and I was like, why? You and I might have talked about that a little bit. I know I talked about it with my friend Jennifer, and I just felt so like I couldn't, I felt like I wasn't able to hold myself in a frequency of health or in a frequency of money, and I wasn't able to concentrate on anything, get like the work done that I needed to get done. And I have ADHD, but that's besides the point, right? It was just a different type of lack of concentration.
Right.
And I realized that it was that collective fear that and powerlessness, and then that transferred to me, and I was like, oh no, like I can't have that. I need to be at maximum capacity so that I can be helpful. And so not only can I be helpful for myself and my family, but so that I can be helpful in fighting back and whatever that looks like. Again, that comes in many forms. And that contribution, again, could just be sharing on social media. Now, I want to do more involved things than just that because I have the capacity to do that. And I'm grateful for that capacity to do that. So I'll help my community in any way that I can. And so self-care is really essential. And something else, I think a lot of people think they have to have a lot of resources. Like, yes, time is a resource. Being able to relax is a resource. And I don't mean just like doom scrolling on your phone. I mean, actually like relaxing. Relaxing is very different from doom scrolling and like rotting in your bed, right? Those things are very different from, like, I don't think a lot of people actually relax or even understand what that feels like. I think I only barely understand what that feels like. I am no expert in relaxing by any means, but just establishing a space in your home where you can do some type of meditative practice or some type of relaxation practice, even if it's only like, even if you have like 10 minutes of downtime, if you can do that, even if it's just you sitting and you read for 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour if you had that much time. Again, because time is also a resource that a lot of people don't have because they're working so much, because everything is so expensive.
Right. Yes.
Right. And it's just a constant, it's a constant mechanism. Like you're constantly in motion.
On that rat wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. On that big old rat wheel.
Gotta make the joke.
To be fair, I'm certain that there are different size reels for whatever rodent that you have. Right. I'm sure, maybe not a capybara.
Right.
I think that would be a very large wheel.
Right.
That would be a custom
I had a
made
roommate that had rats as pets, and so like in my mind it's a rat wheel. But I guess most people have hamsters and not rats that are giant. So that's just the visual I get when I think about something running on the wheel.
It's the rat wheel.
It's a giant rat. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that's how we create free energy is we just get a bunch of rats on wheels.
Right. That's
but not for
so
too
much more
long
time for
because
fun and
they got 5 minutes max and they're done for the day because anything else is cruel unless they're doing it for fun.
Yes.
I think we just solved our free energy problem. But or greener energy anyway. But so take care of yourself. You had to take care of yourself. And I know that probably sounds really silly and like, oh, this is so dumb. Like, why I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to take care of myself. It's like, well, if you don't, your body is going to stop you for you.
Right.
If you don't take care of yourself, if you don't slow down at some point, your body is going to force you to slow down.
Right.
And you have to take care of you before you can really do anything for anyone else. That's what I feel. Or rather you should, or you're just going to burn yourself out. And if you're burnt out, then you're not really going to care.
Right.
And you want to care, right?
Right.
So, and again, sometimes it's just you collect like little knickknacks and things that you like and you put them in a corner and you sit and you hang out with your weird stuff and you pet your cat or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or you watch your rat run on a big rat wheel or whatever it is that you do.
Right. Racing Groundhog Day.
Yeah, racing. That was that's a shout out to our last
flashback. Yeah. And another thing that I'll add that has taken me years to actually learn, and it's actually my records that have reminded me, let yourself also be lifted up. So yes. You're going out and you're doing service work and you're helping everybody and you're sharing smiles and kindness. When you're in that place where you're really low, it is not selfish or negative to reach out and say, I need help now.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing. We're lifting each other up. And when you give people permission to help you, then that's actually good for them. Yeah. Because they're like, oh, well, I can't do a lot, but I can tell Kimmie how badass she is today because she's a little sad. And like that actually gives them that opportunity to do good, which in turn helps them. So allowing yourself to be supported too, because we're always going to have lows, whether it's sickness or something's going on with our family or, there's some issue with the house. It's taken extra money. And so normally you would be the kind of person that was giving, but now you're in that position to give back and be okay with asking for help. You've done a lot. And I think a lot of times we're really just sending things back and forth. I had a friend that sent me money for some card readings that I had done, and I was like, oh, how cool. And then like 2 weeks later, her tire blew out and I sent it right back to her. And we're literally just sending like $33 back and forth forever, indefinitely. Yeah. Because it's like, well, now you need it. So I was just holding that for you, girl. Like, I'll give it right back. Like, and I think that's kind of what community is all about, is like, we share our resources. We lift each other up. We know sickness is bound to come. We know there's going to be catastrophe, but we're going to be there. We're going to have each other's back in those moments. And that's when we all rise. Yes. So, all right. So we kind of talked about this, but just to wrap up, what are some ways we can consciously shift and uplift the energy of the collective?
Well, again, I think it goes back to taking care of yourself, working on a community level, but also really uphold that barrier between you and what's going on with the collective. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean, and I can't stress this enough, that doesn't mean that you don't care. Right. Like, I care very much about what's happening to people in Palestine. I care very much about what's happening to people in Ukraine. But also, when you're inundated with those things and terrible news, you just have to step away sometimes. And you shouldn't feel guilty for having to step away, because you do also have your own mental health to worry about, right? And so, and your own energy to worry about. So it doesn't mean stepping back doesn't mean that you don't care. And it also doesn't mean you're stepping away
just
forever.
Just that you're apathetic now.
No, it doesn't mean that you've developed a blasé attitude at all. You just have to step away sometimes, and just knowing when to step away from that, reground yourself, and then go back in and say, okay, now I can have these conversations. Mm-hmm. Right. Now I can, and
Right. You're
talk
back
about
at capacity because you gave yourself time to rest and retreat.
exactly. And so, because there's so many things. My husband, he's amazing, but he's also he listens to the news a lot and he watches the news a lot. And I do step away and I step out of that, but then I can go back in and say, okay, Larry, update me on what's going on. Or I just give him the space to vent because he needs to vent too, right? And that's the other thing, is that people around us also need to talk about things that are going on. And so, and I'm not trying to sound myopic. Obviously, the US is not the only country in the world, but I think this is applicable really most anywhere, is that there are a lot of things that are troubling that's affecting the collective, and understanding that and holding that space, just like you held that $33 for your friend, right? But holding space for other people. Sometimes I feel like I don't hold space for myself, but I hold it for other human beings.
Right.
And I'm simultaneously in awe of how I can do that, while also, I don't really understand how I do that either. But it's just something I've sort of fallen into. So I think that you can really consciously shift and uplift the energy of the collective by understanding that. I'm going to say this with a big disclaimer. Again, I don't ever claim to know everything. I don't. There are a lot of things that I do know. And there are a lot of things that I do feel very strongly. And, I don't always have rational explanations for those things, which is why I do what I do and I have the profession that I have, and I'm a psychic and a medium and I do weird stuff, right? But to me, that's all just a part of reality. It's just separate from what is the 3D reality where we work and we pay bills, etc. But I want to live in all worlds at once,
right?
No matter how many worlds there are. I want to live in all of them at once. And so something that I think of is, if I am, just as you said earlier, if I'm putting that energy into knowing that, one, into telling people that like they're doing a great job, like one, right, and uplifting the people around me, but two, I don't put the energy of fear back out into the universe, but I really do put the energy of it's going to work out.
Right.
And I really do think, and I this will be a whole other podcast episode, I'm sure, but at some point I would like to talk about where I think capitalism is going, because we know that we're in end stage capitalism. It was never meant to be a sustainable system. I was at a conference recently, and actually one of my professors at UT, his name is Dr. Harry Doms, and he was presenting on a comparison between Elysium, the movie, and Interstellar. And apparently Elysium is really bad, and I have not seen it, so I can't I can't comment on that. However, what I took away from it was, well, several things, but there was one main point, and that basically, and I'm probably totally saying this incorrectly right now, honestly, but the gist of it was, of one of his points was, when you think of an alternative to capitalism, when you think of something different from the system that we have, it seems more and more and more utopian, right? Like basically the further we get along, and again, I could totally be, maybe that was just my interpretation of what he was saying. But I feel that that's true. I think that whenever it's really, really hard to imagine a different system than what we have, because this is what we've always known. How could it be any different? Number one is getting over that. And two is, okay, but what does that really look like? And so I try to put the thought and the positivity and the mindset out there, like just out into the world of, there will be an alternative. It's going to be a lot better. It is going to end up a lot better than we think. Right. And that's what I put out there. And even if that is just total delusion, which I don't think it is. I honestly, genuinely, intuitively, I see major shifts away from capitalism in the form of like communities that are self-sustaining and they take care of one another. But again, that sounds so utopian, and I don't mean in a primitive sense, like without air conditioning, right? Like, I mean, I really do see modern communities taking care of one another. But I don't think we'll start seeing those for maybe about 10 years, maybe a few in about 5. And I also see our transportation system in the U.S. becoming better, more efficient, and not just in certain cities. I mean, I see it like overall countrywide, like intercontinental, a transportation system that's more efficient. And because we also know that, so I'm a firm believer, and I'm going to go back to the chaos that's caused by natural disasters. Obviously, climate change is very real, and we're all being deeply impacted by climate change. And the people who contribute the least to the carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions are those who are affected the most, like people in underdeveloped nations, people who live in these countries that really don't have the ability to adapt to climate change, right? They don't have the resources, they don't have a stable enough government, that kind of thing, right? But something that I do know is that I really truly feel that the earth is capable of healing itself. Now, does that mean humanity will continue to exist? I don't know. But I think the earth itself is very capable of healing itself.
Yeah.
But that is coming in the form of major natural disasters. And so when I look towards the future, I see that getting worse, and then eventually, I want to say balancing out, but it's weird. It's like, I think that as long as we really care and we're very intentional about the things that we buy and how we treat other human beings and the way we treat nature, that we will be okay. But the earth is going to be okay either way.
Right.
Again, it just depends upon if humanity's also going to be okay along with the earth. But I really, really, really do think that we're going to have an alternative to the capitalist system that we currently have. But it just might, I think it's going to take a long time. It might not be something that fully develops even in my lifetime, in your lifetime. But I do think that we will see an alternative. And that's so strange to say. And it's so strange to imagine something different, because this is all that we know.
Right.
But I don't think it's gloom and doom forever. I just don't see that.
Right.
I really don't see just total, utter destruction. I really, really don't. And I could be wrong, but I really think that things are going to be okay. It's just going to take a while. Probably a really long time. And also, another thing to keep in mind is, if capitalism was never meant to be sustainable, then maybe what's going on right now is just the catalyst to get us to where we were supposed to go anyway.
Right. Like the fall was always going to happen. And so maybe it feels chaotic right now because maybe these systems that are failing us are supposed to fail us.
Yeah.
So that they will crumble, and then we will rebuild from the ashes of, these systems that weren't sustainable. It's interesting because, we're coming towards the end. But the other day I was in the records and I was asking about like the earth and the way things are shifting and kind of the fear around it. And Gaia actually came through as the guide, and her words were literally, "Fear not, I've got this." And I think it's interesting how you're like, the earth's going to survive. But like, it was so empowering in that moment for her to just remind me that this is going to end okay.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it takes chaos. Well, I'm going to bring up Nietzsche here, like to give birth to a dancing star, right?
Yes.
And if we can just ride that wave and we can say, okay, I'm scared, so what am I going to do about it? Right? This is frightening, so I'm going to do what I can in the places that I can, and take that fear and turn it into power and actually make change. And that's how we get the utopian vision. Right? And so if we can just say, okay, I'm afraid, and name it and say, I'm afraid of this, and then go out and try to work on creating a better future that fear doesn't exist in. And so it takes people being a little delusional, because you have to imagine it first. And so in the beginning, it's just a vision, and it always seems crazy. But so much that started out as crazy actually turns into some beautiful reality when we choose to follow our dreams, follow our visions, follow our heart. And so if you look around and it's scary and it's chaotic, ground yourself, do those practices, and then say, okay, what's the next step though? Like, what can I do? Because I don't want to just fall into despair and just give up, because that's the only other alternative. What can I do? What seeds can I plant at the level that I'm at to make necessary changes for the people that I can actually help, And there, you're taking your power back, and you're starting to rise, and you're like, actually, I'm not afraid, because I trust that there's a cosmic plan that maybe I can't see right now. And, we all are these immortal, beautiful souls. And at the end of the day, just knowing that alone gives me hope. That even if these systems fail, and even if humans don't make it, we're going to be fine at the soul level. So I'm like, that takes a lot of fear out of, my own psyche, to just trust that, like, I'm going to be okay. Earth is going to be okay.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And also, I do want to add, while I think it's entirely up to humanity, the collective, if we're going to be okay, wholly,
right?
Like mostly. I say I don't really know. I really think that we are, and maybe it does take a little bit of delusion. Yeah. Maybe I'm a little delulu, or maybe it's just getting into that state of creativity and understanding that there are so many other realities, and we co-create our reality, right? And so I think that there is a certain amount of delusion, if you will, with that. But also, isn't it really delusional to be in despair all the time?
Right.
That'll
lead to paranoia, which definitely is a form of delusion.
Exactly. And so
choose your delusion.
Choose your delusion. And it's all my friend Jennifer is just so convinced that this is all a hologram, right? Not literally, but like each lifetime that we come in, that we have a whole new reality to live. And so, we're reincarnating, we're doing that kind of thing. We're okay on a soul level, but that it's like a choose your hologram. I think of it as like, you remember those Goosebump books, the Goosebumps books back in the late 90s? And they give you remember the ones that were like choose your own adventure? Uh-huh. But like, maybe like that, but like not spooky.
Yeah, right.
Not spooky, right? But like, it's choose your own adventure, and that's kind of what it's like every time we come back and we incarnate. And also, which this is a whole other episode, but Earth is not the only planet. We're not the only intelligent life. That is such hubris that human beings would have the audacity to think that we're it. Like, we're it out of the whole, like, out of this universe, out of all the other universes. Really? No. Right. And so I do think things are going to be okay, but it's really, maybe keep a really healthy amount of delusion. Yeah. Or creativity, however you want to label it.
And share that with others. So if we are all delusional together, maybe we'll actually make the change that we wish to see in the world.
Well, and that's what, maybe that's it. So. And that's just co-creating reality with other human beings and with the universe. Your perception is your reality, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you can be aware of the very 3D stuff, but also like understand that big change can happen. And I really believe it will.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear if someone quotes this podcast about these weird girls that were talking about rat wheels on this podcast 10 years ago, said this would happen and now it's happening.
Right.
And so we'll wait and see. I think we'll start to see communities in 5, but I think more of that'll happen in about a decade.
Yeah.
And that's not just my idea. Again, I've talked to other intuitives. I have a very close friend that I've talked to about this, and she's a great intuitive. And I kind of came to this thought before we had the conversation about it. And then, when we did, I was like, hey, I was thinking this months ago. And she's like, yeah, I've been seeing it for a while. And I was like, cool. We kind of came up with the same thing without having that conversation with each other beforehand, without planting those seeds of thought beforehand that we organically came up with,
right,
with that, with these ideas of how things might go. And I really do think we're going to be okay, but things suck right now. And so to make them suck less, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Take care of your community.
Yeah. And I'm just going to lightly sprinkle in some flower essences here, because as you were talking, I was like, oh, I should bring this up. That can be a part of the self-care rituals, which is aspen for unknown fears. Okay. The flower essence aspen, and then the flower essence mimulus for known fears. So if your fear is, the earth is going to be destroyed, and you can name it, put some of that mimulus in your tea. Okay. And I'm telling you, it has helped me so very, very much as somebody that is very anxious and feels collective fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do the aspen when I start to, I'm like having nightmares. I'm, getting like negative impressions in my field. That aspen has been a game changer for anxiety, where I'm like, I don't know. I'm just scared. I don't know what the words are.
Yeah.
Take the aspen. So if you could just, add that into your self-care and you feel powerless, those flowers will actually start to help you clear the fear out of the field. And when the fear is removed, you can start to have those visions of a greater future. You're like, okay, well, when I'm not afraid and I'm empowered, now I can start to dream a little bit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And dreaming's very, very, very important.
Yeah.
That's actually helpful information for myself too. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, good. All right, so we're about to wrap up. Could you briefly share how people can follow and work with you? And I'll also add all your links into the description.
Yeah, fantastic. So you can follow me. You can follow me on Facebook, which is Kimmie Haliburda Psychic, because I have a very creative and unique Facebook handle, apparently. I literally just can't think of I changed my business name. Was Flapjack's Curios, and now it's just Kimmie Haliburda Psychic. And you can also, I finally made a website. Ooh. I'm so proud of myself. It's very pink and pastel and beautiful. Great. Thank you. And that is just KimmieHaliburdaPsychic.com. And I do have a section, like a blog section called Encouragement. I do plan to post a lot there just for free encouragement,
right? Like
advice, like just, and I don't even necessarily want to say advice, because that makes it sound like I have everything figured out, because I totally don't, right? But I just share what I know, and I can't express that enough. I share what I know. There are plenty of things I don't know, but I share what I do know. Yeah. And so you can also book with me at Kimmie Haliburda Psychic, or you can message me on Facebook. I like to work with people, but I love to work with animals. So please bring me your dogs and cats and horses and donkeys and lizards and any critters that you have. They're my favorite. But I will also tolerate working with people. So no, I like working with people just fine, but there's something special about working with animals. So, yes. And I do readings, and again, I'm a medium. I do energy work, and I'm very multifaceted. So
you are.
Thank you.
And I've had you work with me in a lot of different ways, and you're great at all of the things that you do. So I'm very happy to promote your work, because I have benefited from it. So,
I'm very happy to hear that.
Yes. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to come out here and record this beautiful episode with us.
Well, you are very welcome, and as always, I'm very grateful, and I also wanted to say, I think practicing gratefulness too, and being grateful for the people and the things around you, the animals around you, the opportunities that you do have, is also a really great way to help combat that collective fear.
Right.
And the collective panic is just practicing gratefulness. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Yes, thank you. And that just brought up there's no act that's too small in my mind as you said that. So those little things, just gratitude, petting somebody's puppy, smiling, all of that's work. That's something we can contribute. So
Absolutely.
all right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.